If you're a gun guy, you've probably heard it about 100 times. No, you can't have a rifle lower and a pistol upper. That's constructive intent to make an SBR. So you need to keep your rifle lowers and pistol uppers in separate zip codes? Or is this FUD lore? Let's talk about it.
While the host of Fuddbusters is a lawyer, he is not your lawyer. If you pay him, maybe, either way you slice it, the video that you are about to watch is not to be construed as legal advice.
So today we're going to talk about a really common one, and one that grinds my gears quite a bit. I would see this all the time on gun groups. There's always the Randall sitting there trying his best to convince everyone that absolutely everything, aside from watching reruns and collecting Winchesters, will land you in federal prison. The classic case is where someone has a bunch of gun parts, either purchased as a kit or otherwise, and somewhere in there's enough parts that one could conceivably use to assemble an SBR or something. Now imagine someone with an AR pistol upper and a rifle lower, or like an AK pistol with a stock hanging around somewhere. Some people think that these parts alone are enough to make you into a felon, and they talk about constructive intent. Let me start quite simply by stating that constructive intent is not a real thing here. It is a confusion of intent to make a regulated firearm with the concept of constructive possession. Constructive possession is for situations where you had something you weren't supposed to, but it wasn't in your physical possession when the government caught you. It's used in the gun context for things like NFA firearms and prohibited people, where the government finds a firearm outside of your person, but wants to prove that you legally possessed it so that they can charge you. This is going to get an episode all on its own, but the short version is the government tries to prove that you constructively possess something because of evidence that you had dominion, control, and knowledge of the item. How this got caught up with our subject today is the simple fact that you must knowingly or intentionally violate the NFA in order to be convicted of an offense. So, constructive intent was cooked up by forum dwellers in their unceasing crusade to convince themselves and everyone else that everything in the world is illegal. Now, of course, they weren't meaning to do this. They just wound up, I'm sure, from one misreading to another and then a game of telephone. You know how it goes. Of course, where intent is required by law, it requires evidence of actual knowledge and real intent, not constructive knowledge and assumed intent. This was stated in an employment discrimination case, Presley v. Hager, where the Seventh Circuit said, racial discrimination is an intentional wrong. An empty head means no discrimination. There is no constructive content, and constructive knowledge does not show actual intent. In the bankruptcy context, the phrase constructive intent had been used for a couple decades until being reeled in. In the off-cited case of U.S. v. Henderson, it states simply that the law refers to actual intent, not constructive intent. Now, there are some limited contexts where constructive intent exists, such as in injury lawsuits where the injured party is attempting to prove the defendant intentionally caused damage. In that context, the Supreme Court of North Carolina has observed that constructive intent to injure exists where conduct threatens the safety of others and is so reckless or manifestly indifferent to the consequences that a finding of willfulness and wantonness equivalent in spirit to actual intent is justified. So imagine like swinging around a chainsaw while blindfolded in a crowded shopping mall. In such a situation, your conduct was so reckless that, were you to cause an injury, your conduct would be considered awful enough to make it intentional. With those semantics out of the way, let's talk about the issue here, the question as it relates to assembly of NFA firearms. This was squarely addressed by the 1992 U.S. Supreme Court of U.S. v. Thompson Center Arms. You see, Thompson Center makes those interesting single shots you've probably seen kicking around at pawn shops. They manufactured the Contender pistol and for some time made a kit that would convert the Contender into a rifle with a 21-inch barrel. Back then, the ATF contended that if this kit was possessed with the Contender pistol, it would be considered an SBR even if never assembled with the stock and original short barrel that came on the pistol. Thompson didn't like this. As you might know, it can be hard to create a situation where a manufacturer has standing to sue the government, so they got clever. They paid tax and registered a single firearm as ATF described, a package consisting of a serially numbered pistol together with an attachable shoulder stock and a 21-inch barrel. Then, Thompson filed for a refund on their $200 tax. After 6 months passed without ATF taking action on the refund, Thompson sued, arguing they were entitled to it because the unit they registered was not subject to the NFA, as no SBR had ever been assembled. This was brilliant, as it was a way to force the courts to determine whether the package was subject to the NFA without waiting for an attempted criminal case or agency action that could have taken decades. Of course, as often happens in this field, the government won in the first case. The claims court judge agreed with the ATF that the parts alone could be considered an NFA firearm. So they appealed to the Federal Circuit, who reversed. The Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit held that a short-barreled rifle must actually be assembled in order to be made within the meaning of the NFA and thus constitute a violation. There was one other case on the books at this time, U.S. v. Darson, where the Seventh Circuit held that an unassembled complete parts kit for an SBR could be considered an SBR for NFA purposes. And this isn't parts kit like we think of them now with no receiver, this is the whole kit and caboodle. So when the ATF appealed the Thompson Center case, the Supreme Court stepped in to set the record straight, affirming the judgment of the Federal Circuit, holding that the parts alone did not constitute an SBR. Except they muddied the waters a little bit. The Thompson Center Court agreed that the collection of parts was not enough, but also shot in some language about how parts kept in close proximity, whose only useful purpose could be to assemble an NFA firearm, could be considered an NFA firearm. One example they gave was a pistol and attachable shoulder stock for that pistol right next to each other in the same dresser. This instance, though, was different. The Thompson Center could be assembled into one or more lawful configurations. As for those examples, the court indicated that those instances where a combination of parts could be NFA firearms, it would be a situation where the government would prove it would be utterly useless to keep the parts together except for the sole and only purpose of assembling an NFA firearm. The court came to the conclusion that, for gun parts that can have both unregulated and regulated combinations, the statute is vague and the rule of lenity must be applied. The rule of lenity stands for the proposition that, where there is a vague law with criminal consequences, all vagueness must be construed to prohibit as little as possible. It's really a fair rule of construction that's not applied enough these days. So the court found for Thompson Center, the box of parts that could be assembled into a legal pistol, a legal rifle, or an illegal unregistered SBR were not NFA items. Of course, because people can't stop asking the ATF for its opinion, the ATF came out with Atf Ruling 2011-4 in 2011. This basically summarizes the case and states the ATF position that firearm parts which have plausible legal uses are not NFA items just because they could conceivably be NFA items. On the other hand, ATF has tried to stretch the Thompson Center case as hard as it can. It does this by suggesting that an NFA firearm is made if all of the parts are kept in such close proximity such that they A, serve no useful purpose other than to make an NFA firearm, or that they B, do convert a complete firearm into an NFA firearm, such as a pistol and attachable stock, or a long-barreled rifle with a quickly attachable short barrel. It makes a little more sense when you consider the fact that the Thompson Center started as a pistol. Seeing as the NFA was designed to ban pistols, it's okay to make pistols into rifles, but not vice versa. But remember, there's two key points here. One is that the parts would have no use as they are kept, but to complete an NFA firearm. It also seems to focus heavily on the parts being kept in very close proximity. I'm of the opinion that those with collections of parts and who own both AR pistols and rifles have all kinds of uses aside from the unregistered assembly of NFA firearms. Remember also, you do have to intend to violate the NFA and GCA. Not only would the government have to prove that the combination of parts were together in such a way that they would be utterly useless for anything aside from the assembly of a regulated firearm, but also that the individual knew of the factors that brought the weapon into the purview of the law. And this is usually accomplished by people kind of admitting it. Now, I'm not going to tell you what you can do with your specific uppers, lowers, stocks, and clubs. Remember, I'm not here to give legal advice. This is just a conversation on what the law says and how I read it. I will say, though, if the government is poking around in your drawers, it's probably not the best time to be running your mouth. So that's all I got on this one. I just want to say I really appreciate you guys watching and subscribing. And if you want to support me more than that, I just started up a Patreon and a Subscribe Star. I've added benefits like a patron-only podcast, a Discord, and surely more to come. This kind of support will help enable me to make more content more regularly, something I'd really love to be able to do. There's also a link to the Fuddbusters sticker in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching to the end and for your support. I'll see you next time, or if you become a patron or Subscribe Star, I'll see you on the Discord. Remember, the anti-side has been working long and hard passing laws and trying to make more. Anything more than minimum compliance is self-regulation. Y'all take care.